Vixie. I hope you're having a great day, and I hope it only gets better. Welcome back to the Fallout New Vegas series. That is a mini-series, more specifically, where I rate all of the uniques. And also wasn't originally going to be a mini-series, but the video would have been way too long otherwise, so here we are. Just a few things. This little blurb on the front is not going to be as long as the previous video, which, if you have not seen that video where I rate all of the melee and unarmed weapons, you can go ahead and click this card right now, or the link in the description. You can go watch that and come back, or you can watch this one first. It does not matter. This is part 2 of very likely a 3-part mini-series, and aside from that, there's not too much else I want to say before we get into the meat and potatoes of this video. But just in case you did not watch the first episode first, and you are watching this one first, I will inform you that because generally unique weapons tend to be stronger or just generally have more damage than the base counterpart, I will skip mentioning that when I go over like what the unique does special. Because if I did do that, then it would just be incredibly repetitive, which even then, it's probably going to still be a little bit repetitive. But we have a lot of guns to go through in this category, so I would say let's get the comment of the week out of the way so we can move on to the actual video. So while I travel through my hard drive real quick and I find the snip of the comment of the week, I will just say I very much have been appreciating all of the interaction that the videos have been getting. It's great for the algorithm, and I love seeing people like you interact with my videos. Anyway, the comment of the week as I open it here, and you definitely didn't hear my mouse just now, shut up. The theme this week, or last week, not sure how to format that, but we'll just say this week, was what was your first Fallout game, and did you start because of the show? I picked out this comment from Your Dad 2111, great name by the way, where they say, my first game was New Vegas after watching a ton of Fallout lore videos. I started playing a year before the show came out. I picked this one out in particular because Fallout lore is really, really cool, but if you don't want to sit around and read terminals for the next lifetime, there's plenty of good options of people breaking down the lore, so you can see all of the cool little lore tidbits that Bethesda and Obsidian have put into their games. Additionally, we have something a bit different this week as well, and I actually picked out a special runner-up. So I also picked out this comment from Dervish8376, where they say, highly suggest staying away from Project Nevada, old broken mod. And I'll come back to why I brought up this little runner-up in just a moment. Just real quickly, I will say, if you would like to be the next comment of the week, leave a comment down below just saying whatever you feel like. I don't think I'm going to do a theme this week, so just say something that you want to say. It can be funny, it can be stupid, it can be just a completely random anecdote, and so long as I think it's pretty neato, you might show up as the next comment of the week. And occasionally, you'll be a runner-up just like Dervish8376 here. And the reason I picked out the comment from them was they allowed me to segue very cleanly into a little bit of a disclaimer. In the B-roll, I had the Project Nevada mod installed, and for some reason, it broke the visuals, a lot of the guns. And for the energy weapons, which will be next episode, they actually added mechanics to it. So they're not going to be the same way they are in your game, very likely. And in some cases, like the Ratslayer, they don't have the attachments they're supposed to have on them. So if any of the uniques do not look like correct or the way they're supposed to look, blame the stupid mod Project Nevada for ruining everything. But either way, that is all I wanted to say, and that means we can officially move on to the bulk of the video where we rate every unique gun in Fallout New Vegas, starting with a light shining in darkness, the unique 45 auto pistol. This weapon is, of course, wielded by the absolutely badass character Joshua Graham in the Honest Hearts DLC. You primarily get this awesome gun after completing the Honest Hearts DLC and returning to the footlocker located at the Southern Passage, where it will be sitting inside said footlocker alongside another weapon if you do not pick it up off of Salt Upon Wounds. On top of the usual overall damage boost, a light shining in darkness primarily has increased fire rate and less spread, so it's accurate and fires faster than the default 45. On top of it just looking generally badass, this thing is very solid for a 45 auto pistol, which is fairly surprising seeing how pistols tend not to be the best, but there are a few examples that are just absolutely stellar, and a light shining in darkness is definitely one of them. As an honorable mention, because it technically falls into the classification of both unique gun and unique melee weapon, there is a non-playable version of this pistol that in the game is called Joshua Graham's Pistol Whippin' 45, which is used by Joshua if he ever needs to use a melee weapon for whatever reason. He literally just flips it around and pistol whips people with it, and I think that's kind of cool. But it's not playable, so I can't really, bring that up in here because you can't technically use it without cheating. On a whole, this thing's super dope. I love it. It's in one of my favorite DLCs, and it's carried by the coolest character potentially in Fallout history. I don't care what anyone says, Frank Horrigan can eat it, Joshua Graham solos. Generally, I would give this thing an 8 out of 10. It's real cool. Moving on to something decidedly less cool, we have the Abilene Kid limited edition BB gun. Fuck it, I've tried recording that 3 times, so we're just gonna roll with that take. This, of course, is a unique BB gun, which is a weapon you can theoretically use. You can get this BB gun southwest of Nellis Air Force Base in Field Shack, where the gun is just sitting on one of the shelves. Alternatively, if you have the Wild Wasteland trait, you will randomly get a Wild Wasteland proc, I guess, if you are traveling with the companion Rex, which I fully recommend you do because he's the bestest boy in the world, where he will inform you that Timmy has fallen in the well. And then, a unique location called Jimmy's Well will spawn near Field Shack, and you can go down there and loot it from the bottom of the well. As to be expected, this thing is not a good weapon because it is not meant to be a lethal weapon at all in the first place because it's a BB gun. It's not even an actual gun. However, while its damage is absolutely pathetic, its crit damage is actually a solid 70. So when this thing critically hits, it's actually a pretty decent amount of damage. So if you can find a way to crit relatively often, you could theoretically use this, and then you just have a 100-shot lever gun, which is kind of funny. So generally, with the interesting relationship this thing has with damage, with its whack-ass crit damage thing, as well as it being related to Rex in any way, shape, or form, I'm actually gonna rate this kind of high for a otherwise completely useless meme weapon, which is to say, it's gonna get a 6 out of 10. Moving on to All-American, the unique Marksman Carbine. You find this weapon sitting in Vault 34's armory, and let me just tell you, it is a pain in the ass to get there. But it'll totally be worth it because this thing is sitting on the floor inside. However, a fair warning, if you have a companion, they might pick it up at some point when you're not looking, so make sure you grab this thing the moment you get into the armory. It's more accurate, costs less AP, fires faster, and does a higher crit hit damage than the standard Marksman Carbine, which is very, very, very helpful with the fact this thing has a scope. So if you're doing a sneak build, while it isn't suppressed, you can get out quite a few hits before the enemy actually has a chance to track you down and kill you if you're at a good distance. Biggest downside is this thing has a solid gun stat requirement of 100, but it's totally worth it because this thing is absolutely dope. I love it. If you can deal with the absolute nonsense that is Vault 34 and getting to the Vault 34 armory and unlocking the armory, this thing is absolutely dope. I love it. I can say nothing but goodness for the All-American. This thing is super solid. It's real good. I'm gonna give it an 8.5 out of 10. That seems fair. Next up, we have Big Boomer, the unique sawn-off shotgun. This weapon is carried by Old Lady Gibson, who, as you can expect, hangs out in the Gibson scrapyard just near Novak. Unfortunately, there's no way to buy it off her or anything, so you can either steal it off of her by pickpocketing it, or you could just, murk the old lady and take it off of her body, which is also an option, I suppose. Much like All-American, it is actually more accurate and requires less AP to use in VATS than the standard sawn-off shotgun, which, as a side note, shotguns are absolutely amazing for VATS characters because if you roll the chance to actually hit what you're shooting, every single pellet you shoot will be located directly on whichever limb you targeted, ideally the head. So you're going to do a lot of damage in VATS with shotguns. And for that reason, I absolutely love Big Boomer. This thing is awesome. On top of the fact that it just kind of looks cool. The generally darker color scheme of the standard sawn-off shotgun is, of course, awesome. And it's got its name on the side of it, which is a little bit narcissistic, if you ask me, but is generally cool. I'm gonna give this thing a solid 7.5 out of 10. On to the Bozar from the Gunrunner's Arsenal DLC. This is one of many weapons you can buy from the Gunrunner's Vendortron. And, much like every other weapon you buy from the Vendortron, this thing is not cheap. Despite the fact that it looks vastly different, this is actually a unique variant of the light machine gun, which is incredibly strange with the fact that this thing is referred to as the ultimate refinement of the sniper's art, with the fact that it's a machine gun. Yeah, even before I started paying attention to firearms manufacturing and firearms history and stuff, I never liked the Bozar. It always just looked wrong, and it felt incredibly strange having a big giant scope strapped onto an LMG. SMG, even if it's meant to be some weird halfway point between a sniper rifle and a light machine gun, which is not going to work ever. A wise man once said, if something is designed to do two things, it's usually not very good at either. And Bozar is a very good example of that. Ironically, with the fact that it has a gun stat requirement of 100 and a strength requirement of 8, this thing is not the ultimate be-all end-all endgame weapon that it probably wants to be. In fact, it falls off quite quickly. Theoretically, if you can get up to the gun runners fast enough, this thing is an absolute monster in the early and mid game, but in the end game, yeah, it just doesn't really do anything. So with the fact that this gun does not know what it wants to be, and the fact that it falls off very quickly, seeing how most people will get this well into the mid game, I'm gonna give it like a 3.5 out of 10. On to the Old World Blues DLC with Christine's Circle of Steel silencer rifle. This weapon's located in a ruined building on the northwest corner of Little Yangtze, and it's just kind of sitting on the second floor next to some ammo. This is a unique sniper rifle, which typically is supposed to have a suppressor on it, but Project Nevada is very cool and just removed all of the modifications off of it. And seeing how I have always, and I mean always, been a huge fan of the Fallout 3 and New Vegas sniper rifle, I'm a huge fan of this as well. I would actually go as far to say as I like this one better than the Gobi campaign scout rifle, which we'll come back to in just a little bit. Something about a clean, dark color scheme, suppressed 308 rifle is just, it tickles me in a good way. I would go far as to say this thing is maybe my second favorite weapon in Fallout New Vegas. It does have a slower fire rate than the default sniper rifle, but basically everything else about it is better. So this thing is incredibly good. Maybe not quite on the level of the anti-material rifle, but you can theoretically get this weapon way sooner than the anti-material rifle, because you always have the option to immediately rush to the Old World Blues DLC, or any of the DLCs for that fact, as opposed to really having to wait until you get to the level where the anti-material rifle starts spawning. On a whole, with this thing being like my second favorite, not just gun, but weapon in the game, we're gonna give this thing a 9.5 out of 10. This thing is dope. Going a bit bigger, we have the CZ57 Avenger, a unique minigun. This weapon is found in the Devil's Throat, way up northeast. There is a lot of radiation and a lot of centaurs, and maybe occasionally a super mutant or two guarding this thing. So be very careful if you decide to try and get this thing early. But if you do manage to get out of there alive, you'll be rewarded with the highest DPS gun in the entire game. Go figure, it's a minigun. Thankfully, this was before the era of Fallout 4, where Bethesda decided that miniguns should be the lowest damage physically possible to make up for their insanely high fire rate, and this thing is just kind of silly. Which, speaking of silliness, with the fact that miniguns typically have a really high fire rate anyway, it's especially silly that the CZ57 Avenger has an even higher fire rate, as well as having more damage. So it's pretty clear to see why this thing has the highest DPS in the game. It's not my cup of tea. If I go for heavy weapons, I'm usually more of a flamer kind of person, even though it's technically in-game an energy weapon, but you know, splitting hairs and whatnot. But with this being the highest DPS weapon in the game, I gotta put some respect on its name. So we're gonna give it an 8 out of 10. Moving on to Dinner Bell, the unique pump-action shotgun. Dinner Bell is given to you by Red Lucy after completing all of her quests during the Bleed Me Dry quest. The pump-action shotgun has always been an absolute favorite of mine in Fallout New Vegas. It's not quite got that same hilarious amount of bullshittery that the Riot shotgun has, but it is still an incredibly solid weapon. Seemingly a trend for unique shotguns, Dinner Bell has a tighter spread than the default hunting shotgun, likely due to the fact that it comes with the choke mod pre-installed. But in general, this is a 12-gauge pump-action shotgun, very akin to the Remington 870, which, as to be expected, it's incredibly reliable. You can always come back to it. There's almost nothing wrong with it. And I'm gonna give this thing a solid 8 out of 10. And as I mentioned earlier, we remain in the base game as we look at the Gobi campaign scout rifle. This weapon can be found inside a very hard-locked gun case in the sniper's nest just over Cottonwood Cove. Be wary if you try to use the force lock option that there is no key for this gun case, so if you break the lock, you're locked out of getting this gun ever. So make sure that you have plenty of bobby pins and a lockpick skill of 100 before you try getting this thing. But in theory, if you decide to speedrun maxing out your lockpick stat, you can get this gun insanely early. This gun only does a little bit more damage compared to the default one, as opposed to the significantly increased damage of Christine's sniper, but it does have a reduced AP cost in VATS, so if you want the game to do the aiming for you, you can totally do that. As well as, this gun just kind of looks really clean. It's supposed to have desert camo over it, but with the fact that it has this shiny effect that the sniper rifle has innately, it ends up looking gold. So a lot of people just like this gun for the fact that they can just walk over to Cottonwood Cove and pick out a gold sniper rifle from a chest, which I don't blame them. I'm still more partial to the silencer rifle, but on a whole, the Gobi Campaign Scout rifle is a very solid choice, and a very safe choice at that. But for me, it just doesn't quite come to the same level as Christine's silencer rifle does. So we're going to give this a 7.5 out of 10. Before we move on to the rest of the guns, I would like to give a very quick shout out to all of my current patrons. Your support is very much appreciated. If you would like to support me, you can do so on Patreon for just $5 a month, and you'll get a bunch of cool perks, such as work in progress art, whether it be for thumbnails or just something you happen to be working on, full resolution art and full resolution thumbnail art if that's your sort of thing, and most importantly, you get early access to videos so you don't have to wait until Sunday like everyone else, and you will get access to a very special channel where I post all of my uncut and director's cut content, so you can see all of the secret little things that don't make it into the full upload. On top of all this, eventually, when I get enough patrons to support this kind of thing, I will take suggestions from my patrons for games to play on the channel. So if any of that strikes your fancy, make sure to head down to the link in the description and check out my Patreon. Once again, a huge shout out to all of my current patrons. I love you all so much. And now, let's move on to Longue Carabine. I don't like this thing's name because it's hard to say. I already go between saying carbine and carbine, so this one I don't like saying. But this thing is super dope. This weapon is carried by Corporal Sterling in Camp McCarran, though if the quest 3-card bounty has been completed, he and the rest of 1st Recon will move to Camp Forlorn Hope. Unfortunately, much like Big Boomer, there's no way to buy it off of him, and there's no side quest associated to it, so you can't just get it for free, so you will either have to pickpocket it off of Corporal Sterling or kill him and take it off of his corpse, which is really unfortunate because this lever gun looks so clean. I don't think I mentioned this because I was distracted, but this is a unique cowboy repeater. The most notable thing about it is it actually reloads a lot faster from empty than the standard cowboy repeater because it actually uses the same animation as Lincoln's repeater from Fallout 3. Thanks to a later patch in the game, this thing's spread was actually significantly tightened, so this thing is pretty accurate even fired from the hip. On top of just looking amazing, I've always loved the look of old school, extremely long scopes like that. This thing is just, it's incredibly solid. I wish there was a way to get it without having to kill or pickpocket it from Corporal Sterling. On a whole, I just really, really, really like it. It's just the way you get it brings it down just a little bit, so I can only really give this thing a 6.5 out of 10. Moving on to Lil Devil. You buy this weapon from Mick at Mick and Ralph's special inventory if you have the Gunrunner's Arsenal DLC installed. It is a unique 12.7mm pistol, which I have always had we'll say mixed feelings about. On one hand, I do appreciate it looks pretty cool. It's a neat fantasy weapon design, but the part of me that appreciates real weapon design is like, what even is this thing supposed to be, and why is it a 50 cal? It fires much faster than the standard 12.7mm pistol, which is desperately needed, as well as it has a lower AP cost. On top of the fact it just kind of looks extra clean with the fact that it's got a nice dark look to it. As I mentioned, I have mixed feelings about the 12.7 pistol and by extension Lil Devil, but Lil Devil is super cool, and on more than one occasion I have been wondering what would it be like to actually build a character around using it. And in my testing, pretty solid. I might actually end up using this at some point, so we're gonna give it a 7 out of 10. Ah yes, moving on to Lucky, a unique 357 Magnum revolver. Lucky is sitting in a hard-locked floor safe in the Bison Steve Hotel in Prim, meaning you can get it pretty early on so long as you get a lockpick skill of 75 before you go there. I'm sure for many people this is not only their first unique, but this is probably the unique that carries them through quite a lot of the early game content, if not all the way up to Vegas and killing Benny with it. Lucky is a tried and true sidearm that I'm sure many of us have used, and many of us have come to love over the years. On top of the fact that it is a very, very solid early game weapon, it looks clean as hell. I am a sucker for fancy revolvers like this. Engravings provide no tactical advantage whatsoever, and I do not care. This thing is clean. And it's extra fun because it's a 357 Magnum revolver with a higher fire rate. A little bit disappointing that you're going to be, reloading a lot sooner, and with this being a single action, you're going to be reloading it for quite some time, but I would say it's worth it. I would be remiss to rate Lucky anything other than a 9 out of 10. Moving on to Maria, a unique 9mm pistol. This weapon is, of course, carried by Benny, and is actually the first weapon you ever see because it's in the opening cinematic, and it's what you get shot in the face with. So from the get-go, you have a very intimate relationship with this gun in particular. Now, I know I just mentioned that I absolutely love fancy engraved revolvers. I'm not the same when it comes to pistols. When it comes to pistols, I generally prefer something to be much more simplistic and understated, instead of extravagant and garish, gaudy, one of those words. So the insane engravings, the gold trigger, the pearl grip with the Virgin Mary on it, is just a little bit too much for me. I'm much more keen on pistols with a very similar style to the Benelli B76. I don't know what it is about this gun, but it's just, I love it so much. It looks so good. So with that being said, I'm much more partial to the default look of the 9mm pistol. But in general, this is a very okay weapon. It'll do what it needs to for as long as it needs to, and no more. And of course, it's a reward for shooting Benny in the face. So it always has that extra little bit of, haha, I'm using the gun that almost killed me. And it's more durable than the standard 9mm pistol, so you're not gonna have to repair it quite as often. I'm gonna give this like a 6? Yeah, 6 out of 10. Stepping back into the Gunrunner's Arsenal DLC, we have Medicine Stick, another one of my favorite weapons. Much like many other uniques, this weapon is sold by the Vendortron at the Gunrunners if you have the Gunrunner's Arsenal DLC installed. This is a unique brush gun, which means it is a unique 4570 lever gun, which, if you don't know this about me, I absolutely love lever guns, and I absolutely love 4570 lever guns. So this thing is just an absolute banger. I love it so much, especially with like the little charm like dream catcher on the stock. That's just... This thing's clean as hell. It packs a hell of a punch. It looks clean as hell. I'm gonna say that again. I don't care. You can't stop me. It's my video. I love Medicine Stick. I don't think it's my favorite, and I already said that the silencer rifle is my second favorite, so this is probably my third. So we're gonna give this a 9.25 out of 10. Next up, we have the Mysterious Magnum, a unique 44 Magnum revolver. This weapon is wielded by the Lonesome Drifter, who can be found in front of a giant Sunset Sarsaparilla billboard next to the highway just east of the El Dorado Dry Lake. You can get this thing just by killing him and taking it off of his body, or by passing a 50 barter skill check when talking to him to recruit him for Tommy Tarini during the Talent Pool quest. Aside from being another clean as hell looking revolver, this thing of course has a very special, unique thing to it, with the fact that this is the same gun wielded by the Mysterious Stranger if you have the Mysterious Stranger VATS perk. And of course, the most special thing about it is the special little sting it plays every time you draw and holster the weapon. I don't care what anyone says, that never gets grating, and it's always cool. If you want it to be even better, make sure to hit the bad guys with a cool one-liner, just after drawing and just before holstering the weapon. On a whole, it's a 44 Magnum, and this is a unique version of it, so it's incredibly solid. It's not quite on the level as the Ranger Sequoia, which unfortunately is not a true unique, and I will not be covering this in this video, but here's your mention of it. Until you get yourself a Ranger Sequoia, this is definitely going to be your workhorse on your cowboy character. We're going to give this an 8 out of 10. Returning to Gunrunner's Arsenal, we have Paciencia. I'm pretty sure I pronounced that right. I don't know. I don't know Spanish. Maybe it's Paciencia. I don't know. Luckily, unlike most GRA weapons, this weapon is actually sold by Cliff Briscoe in the Dino Bite gift shop in Novak. But, if he dies, it'll then be sold by the Vendortron at the Gunrunners. While being stronger than the standard hunting rifle, Paciencia actually only has 3 rounds in a magazine, which can be seen as a pretty big downside. But this thing does enough damage, and most importantly, enough crit damage, to, I would say, offset the lower magazine size by at least a fair bit. This isn't usually a weapon I typically bother grabbing, because at this time I usually either have the Gobi Campaign Scout Rifle or the Silencer Rifle, so I don't really end up using a hunting rifle at all. But I have used it before, and I have a general, I would say, positive opinion of it. So we're going to give this a 7 out of 10. Next up, we have Ratslayer, a unique varmint rifle that got hit particularly hard by the Project Nevada mod. As you will see in the B-roll, it has absolutely none of the default modifications it's supposed to have on it. You can find this weapon in the Brockflower Cave. It's just kind of leaning on a desk in a makeshift laboratory on the upper level of the place. For the fact that this is usually like the second weapon you ever get, not counting any DLC bonus weapons, this thing is shockingly good, especially considering it's supposed to come as a fully modded varmint rifle, basically exactly near the beginning of the game. As would be expected of a unique, it's just kind of better in every way than the standard varmint rifle, while still retaining that incredibly low and basically nothing requirement of 0 guns and 3 strength. The biggest selling point of Ratslayer is that this thing is an absolute crit machine. So if you're doing a crit sniper build, this thing is absolutely bonkers. Still might not use it over the silencer rifle, but we've already talked about how much I love that thing. Ratslayer is an incredibly solid choice, and I have nothing but respect for it. 7.5 out of 10. Ah yes, returning to the Gunrunner's Arsenal DLC once again, we have Sleepytyme, the unique 10mm submachine gun. You buy it from the Vendortron, as you do many other uniques, and this thing, I would say, is my favorite gun in the game. I love it so much, and I love it so much because it is essentially this game's version of the Perforator or the Infiltrator from Fallout 3's Pit DLC, which, if any of you have played that, you know just how strong those things can be. This thing does not have a particularly high crit multiplier. In fact, it is staggeringly low with the fact that it is an automatic weapon, but with the fact that it's a suppressed 10mm submachine gun, if you're doing a sneaky character, you can absolutely obliterate people with sneak crits from this. You just hide in a corner, use a stealth board if you want to, just to make sure they don't see you, pull it out, mag dump someone, and then their health bar goes away. On top of the fact that it is considered an improved holdout weapon. I have no idea how the hell you can conceal an SMG of this size, but I won't ask questions because that means I can break the bank at the Atomic Wrangler, go to the Vendortron, buy Sleepytyme, and then go to the Tops Casino and absolutely annihilate Benny with my favorite weapon in the game. So 10 out of 10, love this thing. Moving on to one of many bonus weapons from the Courier Stash DLC, we have the sturdy Caravan shotgun. As I literally just mentioned, this is one weapon you get for free just by booting up the game with the Courier Stash DLC installed, or booting up a new game, I should say. It's fairly similar to the standard Caravan shotgun, just a over-under double barrel, and unlike the other unique shotguns we have covered thus far, this thing's spread is actually wider than the default Caravan shotgun, so this is much more, I would say, keen on a VATS build than just running around and shooting people willy-nilly. But generally, if you have the Ultimate Edition of Vegas or just have Courier Stash for whatever reason, this thing is very likely going to be your workhorse in the early game, especially seeing as how 20 gauge shells are pretty common. On a whole though, I find this thing falls off basically immediately, so I'm gonna say this thing's a firm 5 out of 10. Stepping once again into the Honest Hearts DLC, we have the Survivalist's Rifle, a unique service rifle. This weapon is found in a duffel bag marked as the Survivalist's Duffel Bag at the summit of the Red Gate. An important note is if there's any enemies in the area, they will walk over and loot it from the duffel bag, so be very careful about getting this thing as fast as possible, because if you do not retrieve this gun and you leave Zion, you will never be able to get it again. It does not show up in the footlocker at the Southern Passage like a Light Shining in Darkness or Assault Upon Wounds Power Fist. If you do not grab this thing when you're in Zion, it's gone for good. And what a loss it would be! This thing is absolutely bonkers. The most notable thing about it is that it's chambered in 12.7 rather than 5.56, essentially making this a 50 caliber M16A1, which is just really strange for someone who loves the M16 as much as I do. Generally, I would say this thing is really good. I'm not crazy about how it looks, and I really hate the broken front sight. It adds character to the weapon, yes, I would replace the front sight if I found this weapon. So I would say, with it being an incredibly good weapon, while being a wonky whack M16A1 with a broken front sight post, I'm gonna say this thing's like a 6.25 out of 10, but generally for most people this is probably gonna be a 7 or an 8. Next up, we have that gun, a unique 5.56 pistol. This is a unique you purchase from Cliff Briscoe at the Dinobite gift shop and doesn't require the Gunrunner's Arsenal DLC. He just has it. Additionally, if you don't feel like buying it from him, you can just kind of sneak behind him and open the door behind him discreetly and grab the weapon from the shelf inside. So with that in mind, this is another very solid workhorse weapon for the early game. And if you play your cards right, this thing can actually go pretty decently far into the mid game without too much of an issue. You'll probably just have to start, using different ammo types such as armor piercing and hollow point at that point. But generally, it's that gun. I'm sure we've all used that gun at some point. It's incredibly solid, it's a total workhorse for the early game, works pretty well for mid game, and it's a Blade Runner reference, which is always good. So we're gonna give this thing a 7 out of 10. Next up, we will be experiencing Canada's finest manufacturing with this machine, a unique battle rifle. A fun fact about this, while this is a unique variant of the battle rifle, this is actually a base game weapon. Whereas the battle rifle, you need to have the Gunrunner's Arsenal DLC. So even if you don't have GRA, you can still get this machine if you want to use the M1 Garand. All you have to do to get it is complete the unmarked quest Dealing with Contreras. You get it from either Sergeant Contreras if he isn't turned in, or Lieutenant Boyd if he is. It's an M1 Garand, so I automatically love it. And of course it has a higher fire rate, so you can get to that trademark ping, even though it sounds a little bit different, just a little bit faster than the standard battle rifle. On top of the fact of you being able to get the battle rifle at all if you don't have the Gunrunner's Arsenal DLC. So with the fact that this thing is an absolutely wonderful, wonderful battle rifle that I have always had a fondness for, and is technically a DLC weapon that you can get even if you're just running totally vanilla, this thing's gonna get an 8 out of 10. It's super cool. Moving on to Vance's 9mm submachine gun, another one that was hit pretty hard by Project Nevada being stupid. This weapon is found inside a safe, locked with a very hard lock in Wynn's hideout. Or if you have a speech skill of 55, you can convince the Wynns to provide the combination to the safe and you can just walk over and grab it. It's a 9mm submachine gun, which I've always been kind of iffy about, because it's based off of a grease gun, which is not 9mm, it's 45, and its fire rate is way higher than a grease gun's fire rate actually is, but at the same time, it's pretty dope looking. And most importantly, this thing is just, it looks clean. The blackened steel finish with the big pistol grip, God, it looks good. I've never actually used this weapon though, because I never knew how to get it. I never found it. So I don't really have experience with this gun. Aside from, when I was recording B-roll for these videos. And since I was testing it on Deathclaws, I didn't really get a feel for how the weapon actually operates. But generally, I felt it's very okay. It definitely has a place somewhere, I just haven't found it yet. So purely because I don't really have a track record with this weapon at all, I feel it's only really fair if I give it a 5 out of 10. And to close off the video of all of the unique guns in Fallout New Vegas, we have the humble, weathered 10mm pistol. A unique 10mm pistol. This, much like the Caravan shotgun, is given to you immediately upon starting a new character if you have the Courier Stash DLC installed. I've always been a big fan of the 10mm pistol, even if it looks a bit strange, and now that, I'm into firearms manufacturing and firearms history, stuff like that, it is extra weird and insanely chunky, but I can't help but love it. It has so much character, it has so much personality, it's such an iconic looking gun from the Fallout franchise, I love it so much. And the weathered 10mm pistol is okay. I would say it's okay. I have done entire builds in both Fallout 3 and New Vegas where I just use the 10mm pistol and other early game starter weapons, so to speak, throughout the entire game, and they can definitely work. You just gotta have quite a bit of ammo for the chunkier targets. And I would say, of the basic weapons I have built directly around before, the weathered 10mm is one of the more solid ones. I have a very particular fondness for this gun in particular, especially the fact that it is very clean and understated, which I mentioned I like before on semi-automatic pistols. I've always loved 10mm, and I've loved 10mm ever since I played Fallout. Me using the 10mm pistol and the 10mm submachine gun in 3 New Vegas has fostered a love for the caliber in real life. I just love 10mm in general. I wish there were better options for 10mm carbines, but there really isn't. But in general, God. It's obviously not the best weapon in the game, but I love it so much. We're gonna give it a 9 out of 10. And with that, we close off all of the unique guns in Fallout New Vegas. As I mentioned, we're not doing anything that is not classified as a true unique, aka you can get more than one of it, such as Ranger Sequoia and Red Glare. So we have officially covered all of them. And now that I really want to go back and just grab the silencer rifle again, because I forgot how much I like that thing. But in general, I'm going to cut this video here. we will return once again, most likely next week, to finish off this mini-series with rating all of the energy and explosive weapons, so make sure you are subscribed with bell notifications turned on so you don't miss that. But in general, I have been rambling enough, so if you genuinely enjoy this video, consider dropping a like, and make sure to hit that subscribe button to become a pup if you haven't already, and to hit the bell so it actually does something. If you want to support me in the channel, you can do so on Patreon for just $5 a month, and you'll get a bunch of cool perks. A huge shout out to all of my current patrons. Your support is very much appreciated. I love you all so much. My name's Vixie, and I will see you all in the next one.